today, as we're approaching Pesach. Um, I thought I would talk about, there's a Rambam, a famous, one of the chapters in Maimonides in the Rambam, in his Mishnah Torah, which deals specifically with Pesach and with the mitzvah of V'higadat Levincha on Pesach. We know that we have on Pesach lots of mitzvahs which we do in preparation for Pesach, on Pesach. Some are deoraita these days, some are derabanan these days. Moror, even though it's mentioned in the Torah, it's a deoraita mitzvah, but the mitzvah of Moror is always mentioned in conjunction with the mitzvah of Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach we don't have nowadays. It's al matzot umrorim yochluhu. It should be eaten with matzah and moror. Therefore, since we don't have the Korban Pesach nowadays, we can't get the mitzvah nowadays at all of Korban Pesach, the mitzvah of moror, if it's not in conjunction as part of the Korban Pesach shawarma sandwich, then it's only rabbinic in nature. And one might ask, if that's the case, why is matzah mitzvah deoraita, a Torah mitzvah even nowadays? And the answer is because there's a separate pasuk regarding matzah, which doesn't only connect it with the Korban Pesach. There's a separate pasuk which says ba'erev tochlu matzot, which is a mitzvah to eat matzot, regardless of whether we have the Korban Pesach with us or not. There's a mitzvah of eating matzot. So anyway, matzah d'oraita, moror is d'rabbanan. There are lots of other mitzvahs. One of the other mitzvahs which we probably spend a lot, I would say it's the least expensive mitzvah because it's Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, doesn't cost money, but with the amount of Haggadot which are out, so everybody's always buying more, and we all have boxes and boxes of Haggados, and every year people who are dead for many years are publishing new Haggados. They put out, I don't know how many, I lost track, but a number of years ago someone told me how many new Haggados are put out each year. It's astounding how many new Haggados, new editions of Haggados are put out every year. So it's, I guess, not such an inexpensive mitzvah if you want to buy the Haggados. Also, now they have kits, so you don't just leave it up to the people's imagination or to talk about these things, but you have to have some people come equipped to the Seder with a bag of plastic frogs and all kinds of things to make it real for the kids, which is certainly nice for people who like that. So there's sometimes an expenditure into Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim as well, even nowadays. The Rambam in Perek Zion, in the 7th Perek of Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah, speaks in depth, and I don't think I've done this in the past with you. This is a little bit of a problem of not being as organized maybe as I should be. I should probably write down what if we talked about it. Certainly not in the context particularly of the Rambam. I don't know if I did this, but I apologize if some of this I may have talked about before. Certainly not this year, but a different year. But since this is Kitat Vatikin, nobody remembers it anyway, what happened last year. So I'm not that concerned. As I said, in the 7th Perek of Hilchot Chametz U'Matzah, the Rambam discusses the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. Before we see it, I'm going to share the screen, share it with you inside some of it. I want to just, as a slight introduction, mention that there's a complexity here and a layer to the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, in that there's a Gemara which says that one should mention Yetziat Mitzrayim both during the days and during the night. It's a Mishnah in Masechet Brachot, and Ad she'te'amer Yetziat Mitzrayim balelot, Yemei Chayecha, sounds familiar from the Haggadah. Yemei Chayecha hayamim is a machloket. Kol Yemei Chayecha l'rabot et halelot. Another opinion is Yemei Chayecha ba'olam hazeh. The Kol Yemei Chayecha, there's a mitzvah of Sipu Yetziat Mitzrayim. One might think that after Mashiach comes, Yetziat Mitzrayim will no longer be such a prime and front and center kind of event. And according to his opinion, yes, it will still be so, and there'll still be a mitzvah, Lizkor Yetziat Mitzrayim, even after Mashiach comes. At any rate, most of the poskim understand that there is a mitzvah to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim even at night. It's mentioned in the Gemara. It's mentioned tangentially halacha also. When it comes to, we say, the parsha of tzitzit, even though tzitzit is pretty much a day mitzvah, or begadim, which we wear during the day at least, and yet we say the parsha of tzitzit in Kriyat Shema even at night. And one of the reasons given is that since it mentions Yetziat Mitzrayim, it says at the end of the parsha of Tzitzis, it says Yetziat Mitzrayim. It mentions Yetziat Mitzrayim, so yes, that's why we say it at night, because there's even an issue of mentioning Yetziat Mitzrayim even at night, every night. So if that's the case, the question arises, if there is a mitzvah, a special mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim on Pesach, so why is that different than any other night? Why is, there's a mitzvah every night to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim, Zecher L'Yetziat Mitzrayim. So what's special? Manish Tana Halayla Hazeh. Why is this night different if there's a mitzvah every night to mention it? Now you say, well, we have to do something different. It's more. The Rambam, by the way, in his codification of the mitzvos, 613 mitzvos, counts the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim on the night of Pesach as one of the 613 mitzvos. He doesn't count the mitzvah of mentioning Yetziat Mitzrayim every night as one of the 613 mitzvos. Some of the Achronim, in fact, say, well, the Rambam held that is only rabbinic in nature. That's only derabana. And the mitzvah of the night of Pesach is a Torah mitzvah, but the mitzvah to mention Yetziat Mitzrayim every night is rabbinic. It's only rabbinic. And that would explain that's the difference. The mitzvah of the night of Pesach, it's a deoraita, and the other nights of the year, it's only derabanan. There are those who say no, that the Rambam holds also that every night it's also deoraita. And then the question really comes into focus, what's different about the night of Pesach? How is the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim different than the night of Pesach? Let me just say that, and we all know this, there's something, the night of the Seder is, probably, if we think about the most important days as conveyors of the Masorah to the next generation, as parents, as grandparents, nothing comes close to the night of the Seder. Everything we do, every Shabbos meal, every Yantif, every religious experience, every experience where we are showing Torah values and growth are important in terms of educating the next generation. But nothing comes close to the night of Seder, when we sit down and we talk about who we are and where we came from and what it's all about. So it's extremely, powerful, the night of Seder, and the mitzvah of a V'higadat levincha that we do the night of Seder. So I want to share with you now let me find it here. share screen. Okay, I need to be, I can't share screen. Host disabled, participant screen sharing.
Now.
Okay, great. No. No. My screen sharing is paused. Oh, 1 second. Resume share. Why can't I? I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Are you seeing now the screen? Yes?
Yeah. Can you make it bigger or not?
I probably can. Yeah, let me do that.
You can just stretch it. Oh, okay. Fine.
Oh, I thought
I
I
don't
would
know.
just
if you can, it's good.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, great. Now, as I said, I'm reading here from the 7th perek of the Rambam's Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah. And he starts off by saying, Mitzvat Aseh Shel Torah, it's a mitzvah from the Torah, L'saper b'nisim v'niflaot shena'asu la'avotenu b'Mitzrayim, b'leil chamisha asar b'nisan. There's a mitzvah on the night of the 15th, which is Motzai Shabbat this year, to tell over the nisim and niflaot. Shenamar zacharat hayom hazeh asher yatzata miMitzrayim. Kemo shenemar zachorat yom haShabbat. And just like there, it's on Shabbat. The mitzvah of zachorat yom haShabbat is, even though there's an inyan to remember Shabbat even during the weeks of the day, but the main mitzvah of mentioning Shabbat, zachorat yom haShabbat lekadesho, is the mitzvah of Kiddush, which we do on Shabbat. So here too, it's on Pesach. Uminayin shebelel chamisha asar. How we know that's dafka that night. Talmud lomar levigarita levincha bayom ahu lemor ba'avur zeh b'sha'a sheyesh matzah umarar munachim lefanecha. So that's telling us something about time, according to the Rambam. When it tells us ba'avur zeh, ba'avur what? There must be something in front of you. The zeh is when you have the items of the Seder before you. So the mitzvah of the mitzvah de oraita, according to the Rambam, is to speak and tell over the nisim and niflaot at a time when the matzah and the morar munachim lefanecha v'higarit levincha. That is the time. And he just continues in this halacha. I'm not going to read it all with you. Just I highlighted part of it. V'af al pi she'en lo ben. Afilu chachamim gedolim chayavim lesaper b'yetziat Mitzrayim. V'chol ha'ma'arich b'dvarim she'ir'u v'shahayu harei zeh meshubach. And even if someone, it's not just if you have been here as a child, even if you don't have a child, even if you know it all, even if we're chachamim gedolim, we know all the midrashim, we know all the chazal, we know this all, there's still a mitzvah to talk about it. And the more, the better. Kol ha'marbe l'saper b'yetziat Mitzrayim harei zeh meshubach. What we're seeing right from the very beginning, and I think this is going to be a theme, which I'm going to try to show in the Rambam, is that this mitzvah is not merely an intellectual mitzvah. It's not to recite facts. I'll say this, and we see it with our kids and with our grandkids, and God willing, this year we'll be zochem more to sit with families than last year, if not completely or all of us, then somewhat things are opened up. But when we sit with our children and our grandchildren, there's a lot of times they come with facts. They come, maybe I've told you this before, they come with their booklets. The kids come prepared, and especially in America, I hear it's a little bit less. In America, I found the parents expect that the schools prepare the kids. I think it's a little less, the Israeli mentality, even though there are expectations, and I'm not saying they're less, but they're a little different. In America, there was very much the sense that, that a lot came from the schools. In Israel, there's, I think, more of a sense that the kids get a lot from the homes. So a lot of the basic religious things, they don't necessarily have to get from the school. I remember when I was a principal in the States, a parent complained, it was a rabbi of the community, actually, I was surprised, who called me up and said, the kid came home without knowing the brachos for the Neros Hanukkah. They should have learned the brachos, the Hadlik Ner Shel Hanukkah, Asanis in school. And I heard what he said, but, I don't know if that would be the same, if people would feel the same way here. It's an interesting question, but a sense that the school has to really prepare the kids in all these ways. Certainly, there's a sense that the school, and there's always, and I know this from years in chinuch there, you expect the kids to come home with a booklet with all their stuff, and they come to the Seder. I remember as a kid myself, you came with your booklet of all the things that the Rebbe or the Morah or whoever it was, the Divrei Torah. I still remember my father, with my nephews when he first came with the booklets, with the big thick loose leaf binder to say over at the Seder. My father, turned to my nephew and said, how much can I give you for that booklet? My father wanted to move the Seder along, and it would take a little time. So he offered them a bribe to get the booklet. But the kids come prepared, and it's very nice, obviously. And we're going to see in the Rambam, and I think what's very significant is, it's not just about facts. It's not just about the kids coming and rattling off this and that, that it's good for them to be knowledgeable. But what we want to try, when the Rambam says, afilu kulanu, and we say it in the Haggadah, this nusach, afilu kulanu, afilu chachamim gedolim, chayavim lesaper b'yetziat Mitzrayim. It's not a matter of knowledge. It's not an issue of intellect, of knowledge. It's an issue of emotion. And I want to show this in the Rambam. I think we're going to see this throughout. Look at halacha lebet. Halacha bet. Mitzvah lahodia lebanim. Va'afilu lo sha'alo. Even if they didn't ask, there's a mitzvah to tell the children. Shenemar v'igada levincha. Ulefi da'ato shel ben aviv milamdo. The Rambam is giving us powerful, in every sentence, I think he's giving us powerful educational messages. Lefi da'ato shel ben aviv milamdo. We have to teach, we say this, Shlomo HaMelech said it before the Rambam, right? What's the pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech told us? In Chanoch L'na'ar al pi darko. That we teach, and we always have to take into account the child that we're teaching to. I may have wonderful Torah and a wonderful Vart and beautiful ideas and deep ideas, but are they connecting with the people who are at my Seder? Are they connecting with my children and my grandchildren? Or is it something I just like? It's a nice idea, but is it resonating with them? And what the Rambam is telling us is that we always have to look at the da'ato shel ben, lefi da'ato shel ben, aviv milamdo. And that means understanding our children, knowing our children, and knowing what will work for them. And this comes out again, the Rambam doesn't talk about with the Arba Banim, that they're not all the same, and some are like this, and some are holding by this, and some, it doesn't mean that a person's always stuck in, this is the brusha, this is the tzah, This year, this kid may be going through things. He may be a she'eino yodei l'shol. He may be rebelling a little bit. He may be the rebellious son right now in his stage of life. I have to deal with him as the rebellious son. That's what the Rambam's telling us. We need to connect with each child. And he goes on and he says, I'm moving to halacha gimel. V'tzarich la'asot shinui b'layla hazeh. We should do things a little different than normally. Kidei sheyir'u habanim, so that the children see it, v'yeshalu. And when it says banim here, of course, it's referring to children. V'yeshalu, and they ask, v'yomru manish tana halayla hazeh mikol halelot. ad sheyashiv lahem, until we can answer them. V'yomar lahem kach v'kach ira, kach v'kach haya. Until we answer them and can tell them, here's what happened. So listen to what the Rambam is saying. The Rambam is telling us what I think is the first piece. When I started off by saying, what's different about the mitzvah, the night of Pesach? So the first thing which is identified by the Achronim in what the Rambam says is that it's derech she'elah v'tshuva. It should be done through questions and answers, not rattled off questions and answers, but piquing the curiosity. We all know this. People learn best when they're curious about things. So I sit you down and say, I'm giving you a lesson on this and this. You're interested, you're not interested, you didn't. But when somebody when it's a teachable moment, when somebody asks a question, when somebody says, why is that so? That's the opportunity to teach a child. That's the opportunity to teach a friend. That's the opportunity to teach ourselves when our curiosity is piqued. So therefore, the Rambam says, Sarich lasot shinui balayla hazeh. We should do things in order to pique the curiosity. Now, again, so much of what we do now is formulaic. Like everything, like our davening is formulaic, like so much of what we do is formulaic. But we shouldn't lose sight. The formulas are important because they help guide us. They help direct us, the formulas. But if we only do the formulas and we lose sight of what the formula is about, then that's unfortunate. Then we're missing out on something. So to do things which children ask about is significant because it piques the interest. So the kids get up and they say, okay, who's going to say the Manish Tana? It's always the production. I don't know how it is by you guys. I don't know, somebody always ends up crying. One of the kids, I prepare, somebody left, somebody looked, somebody didn't look, somebody this. You probably have the kid who will only say the Manish Tana from under the table because nobody should look at him or her. So, we all have that's what we've gotten to, the formula. But to do things, what it's all about is, and we should do the formula. I'm not saying don't do the Manish Tana, chas v'shalom. And there's value in the kids preparing and saying and being a part of it. It makes them part of it. I would not at all downgrade the formula, but to pique the interest and have the kids think and say, wow, Savta, why are we doing this? That's really what it's about. And what's interesting here, which I always found interesting, is that there are things that we do which the answers, when they ask the questions, the answers relate to the things that we do. Meaning we dip the karpas in Salzwasser, in the salt water. So they ask, why are we dipping? So, all right, if we give an answer about that, we can answer, the salt water is the tears. The Rambam didn't dip in salt water, we dipped in charoses, but the dipping is derech cherus. We're showing ourselves free. What's interesting here, and it's fascinating, is that we also do things just to make them say, what's going on here? And if they ask what's going on here, we have to explain, well, we're doing strange things so that you ask. But the answer doesn't relate to these particular things, such as, look what the Rambam says, Ketzad Mishana, Mechalek Lahem Klayot ve'egozim. You give out nuts, klayot ve'egozim, roasted or nuts, ve'okrim hashulchan milefnehem kodam she'ochlu. When they used to eat at small tables, they would move the table away. They would do things just to be strange. We got nuts. If they ask, Abba, why are we giving out nuts? Nuts have nothing to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim. There were probably some nuts who left Mitzrayim also, but has nothing to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim. So why are we giving out nuts? We're giving out nuts just so they ask, there's something going on different. Meaning we do some different things that we have an answer for related to the things that we're doing. And we do some different things where there is no answer about these particular things. But we do, look, and the Rambam says it's interesting. The Mishnah says, and I'll point this out because the Rambam says this, it's a shita of the Rambam. When I worked I was a Rebbe, and then later on, I was a principal in Silver Spring, Maryland, in the school there, the Hebrew Academy of Silver Spring. It's called the Berman Hebrew Academy now. So I had a colleague there who was very against the custom of stealing the afikoman. Didn't like it. He was a good guy, and we used to talk about it. He said, it's not, we're teaching our kids to steal. Is that the chinuch? That was his thing. He was a very straight guy. We all grew up with stealing the afikoman. It keeps the kids up. And he said, he didn't like that custom of stealing afikoman. Where does it come from, the custom of stealing afikoman? There is a Mishnah which says, chotfin matzah, that you would grab the matzah on the night of this Pesach. Now, the truth be told is that most of the commentaries understand that chotfin matzah means something else. What it means is, the Rashi, the Rashbam on the spot in Psachim, chotfin matzah, what does it mean, chotfin matzah? It means you don't want kids to fall asleep. So you get moving quickly. Don't come home from the Seder, from Shul, the night of Pesach, and sit on the couch and schmooze and read the newspaper. And then we'll say we'll do the Seder in another half hour. But no, chotfin matzah, you do it quickly. Chotfin matzah means you start the Seder, have it all ready so that one can start. We shouldn't make ourselves or our spouses completely crazy with this, but we should get a move on. We should have things prepared so that when we come home from shul, we can go straight into the Seder. That's chotfin matzah. The Rambam, and I think the Rambam is the source for this stealing, for this minhag of stealing alcohol. Look what he says. V'chotfin matzah ze miyad ze. So he's clearly understanding chotfin matzah, you make a little game. Chotfin matzah ze miyad ze, which does sound like stealing the afikoman, where they would play some kind of game, however it was, but it was doing some. Now again, what does chotfin matzah have to do with Yetziat Mitzrayim? Nothing. Meaning, we do strange things to keep the kids awake and interested. So, and pique their curiosity. But we even do things which are not directly related and have a direct answer, just simply to make them ask, what's going on? So that's the first thing that the Rambam says. We want to do things to pique questions and answers, curiosity. People learn best when they have questions, when they're inquisitive, when they discover, when it's not just, it's frontal learning, that it's it's inquisitive inquiries, interesting. We want to know the answer. We have questions, and that's the best way to learn. Number one, that's the first thing the Rambam we would say that makes this mitzvah different than every other night of the year. Second, number two, v'tzarich l'hatchil b'genut u'l'sayim b'shevach. There's another special thing we do here. We have to begin with negative and go to positive. Matchil b'genut u'mesayim b'shevach. Without getting into reading it, the whole halacha, there's a machloket whether it's a spiritual genut and shevach or a physical genut and shevach. It's a machloket in the Gemara. Is the genut, the negative, that our forefathers were idolaters, mitchila ovdei avodah zara hayu avotenu, and is the shevach v'achshav kervanu la'avodato, that God brought us close to serving Him, or is the genut a physical genut, avadim hayinu lefaro b'mitzrayim, and the shevach vayotzienu? What do? We do both. We talk about the spiritual low point and the physical low point, avadim hayinu, and the high points, matchil b'genut u'mesayim b'shevach. And that's what he says here. We say all these things, Messiah b'dat emet shekevanu, v'chein matchil modia she'avadim hayinu l'farav mitzrayim v'chol ha'agara u'Messiah b'nisim u'v'chlo shenasu lanu u'b'bchiratenu. V'hu she'yidrosh, and then we were doresh the psukim me'arami oved avi in Parshat Kitavo, the Parshat of Bikurim, ad she'yigmar kol ha'parsha v'chol ha'mosif u'ma'arich b'drash parsha zu harei zeh meshubach. Anybody, the more we do, the more we are doresh this parsha, the more mishubach it is, the more praiseworthy it is. Now, so the second thing the Rambam says here is there has to be this inyan of starting with the negative. And we start with the negative before we get to the positive. What's that about? I would say the same thing. We start with the negative, you make it more real. We only appreciate the positive. Let's say it this way, we appreciate the positive a lot better than if we understand what the negative was. Somebody who's gone through hard times can appreciate what it is to have good things in life. Somebody who has not gone through hard times, it's more of a challenge. Let's put it this way. It's more of a challenge to appreciate the good things in life. A person who's grown up with plenty and never being hungry and never wanting for anything, for food, for clothing. I'm not saying that they cannot appreciate things, but it's more of a challenge for them. Through understanding what it is not to have something, then we can truly appreciate what it is to have something. I always mention the poem. I think it's called "As I Lay Dying." There must be somebody here who knows this poem. As I lie dying, as I lay dying. I'm not sure who the author was, but I should have Googled it first. Where it talks about who's the soldier who appreciates victory in war. And it's not the soldier who won, who's out celebrating. It's the soldier who lays dying on the battlefield, who lost. They can truly appreciate what victory is. The losing team in the championship who lost and then sees the other celebrants and is dejected, they appreciate winning more maybe than the winners appreciate it. Through not having something, we appreciate what it is. So matchil begenut u'mesayim b'shevach, I would say, really goes back to this idea of emotion. Clearly, the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, again, we see, is not merely intellectually understanding something. It's feeling something. It's feeling what it is to be free. How do you feel the positive? By going back to what the negative was. If we go back to what the negative was, then that can help us really appreciate what the positive, what the good things that we have are. Matchil begenut u'mesayim b'sheva. And the Rambam also, by the way, what's interesting is we are doresh which psukim? Arami Oved Avi. Where are those psukim from? Parshat Ki Tavo. One would think, and the whole Haggadah, not the whole Haggadah, but the bulk of the Haggadah are those 10 psukim or so. I don't know how many psukim there are exactly. Vayareu, vayanunu, vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha, vanitzak el Hashem elokei avotenu, vayaret onyenu, ve'etam aleinu, ve'et lachatzenu. Where are those psukim from? Not from the book of Exodus. One would think that the Baal Haggadah would have chosen psukim. There are plenty of psukim. Exodus is the book of the Exodus. Why choose psukim from Parshat Ki Tavo? Now, in a way, one could say, well, it's an encapsulated, it's an executive summary of the Exodus. So that's why we use those psukim from Ki Tavo, because we don't have time. Imagine how long the Haggadah would be if we read Parshot Shemot ad Bishalach. There would be lots of psukim. It would be a lot longer. So this is the executive summary. One could say it's the executive summary, but I think it's more than that. These psukim from Parshat Ki Tavo are the psukim that someone recites when they bring the bikurim, when they take their first fruits and they bring them to the Beit HaMikdash. The mitzvah of bikurim, if you think about it, is the mitzvah of hakarat hatov. It's the mitzvah where you took us out of Mitzrayim, through the Midbar. You gave us a Torah. You gave us this beautiful, wonderful land. And I planted in this land, and I plowed and planted, and I grew fruits. And here, I've brought the first fruits up to the Beis HaMikdash as a matana, as a gift, as an expression of my hakarat hatov. And that's why we choose these psukim, because the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is not just intellectual. It's not intellectual. It's emotional. It's hakarat hatov. When it comes to hakarat hatov, it's an expression of thanks. It's an outpouring of thanks. And by the way, that's why the Rambam says, and if you know this, the Rambam says, and we say it in the Haggadah, Kol hamarbe l'saper b'yitzir, kol hamosif u'ma'arich, harei zeh mishubach. The more, the better. We normally have a rule that we should not tamper with the nusach, which the rabbis put forward, which Chazal put forward. There's a concept of kol hamosif goreya. By adding, you make it less. So it says in Tefillah that the Anshek Nes Hagdolah U'Metake, and we say, Akel Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora. The Gemara says if somebody wants to add Akel Hagadol Hagibar V'Hanora V'Hamifoar V'Hatov V'Hadeh V'Hazeh Mishatkin Oto. You shut him up. You don't do that. Because, or somebody did that and when they went to the Chazan, and one of the Tanaim said to him, that's all? You have nothing else to add? So basically said, this is what Chazan, once you add, you're never going to add enough. So don't add too much. Right? Don't put more because you'll never do justice. So why don't you say the same thing over here? Say what's in the Haggadah, don't add because you'll never do justice. The answer is because here, this is not just praising. This is thanking. This is Hakaras HaTov. And when it comes to Hakaras HaTov, there's not a thing of don't add more. You won't do enough. You're right. I won't do enough. I'll never thank God enough. But that doesn't stop me from doing my darndest to thank God as much as I can. And that's why there's a concept of Kol HaMosifu Ma'arich Harei Zeh Meshubach. There's not a concept of just do this because you'll never do God justice. When it comes to praising, you're right. Only do this, don't do more because you'll never do justice. But this is not praising, this is thanking. It's different. Let me move on just to so we said two major differences, two major concepts that we have to, in the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim, the night of Pesach. One is a back and forth, questions and answers, piquing the interest. Number two, going back to what it was, appreciating what we didn't have, and then Messiah b'Shevach. Matchil b'Genus Messiah b'Shevach. Rambam says a third specific requirement to be Yotzei the mitzvah. It's Kol mi shelo amar, in Pasuk Perek in Halacha Hey. Kol mi shelo amar shlosha dvarim elu b'leil chamisha asar lo yatsa yedei chovato. Anyone who doesn't talk about these three things did not accomplish their mitzvah fully. The Eluhain, Pesach, Matzah, Umoror. And he explains each one. Pesach al shum shepasach, Maror al shum shemaro amitzum et chayehem, Matzah al shem shenigalu. You have to talk about these particular things, Pesach, Matzah, and more. It's not enough to say, I remember Hashem took me out of Mitzrayim. One has to talk about the items that are in front of him. They have to talk about Pesach, Matzah, Umar. Now, it's interesting. This is a Mishnah, also in Arvei Pesachim, in Masechet Pesachim, brought in the name of Rabbi Gamliel. We know that it's a very important part of the Haggadah. Maybe some remember the same. Even if for some years something's going on, for some reason we can't recite the whole Haggadah, this is a very important part of the Haggadah to say, Rabbi Gamliel says, that you have to say Pesach, Matzah, Umar, and talk about these three particular things. There's a machloket, interesting machloket. It says anybody who doesn't talk about these three things is not Yotzei the mitzvah. There's a machloket Rishonim, what mitzvah is it talking about? Some say that it's talking about the mitzvah of Pesach, Matzah, Umar. That there's a special requirement. Normally, if I do a mitzvah, I just have to shake the lulav. It's nice to think about what the lulav is about, but if I don't think about what the lulav is about, I still get the mitzvah. When it comes to Pesach, Matzah, Umar, that's something special, that to get the mitzvah fully, I have to really think about or articulate what the Pesach is about, what the Matzah is about, and what the Morah is about. That's the way some Rishonim understand this Mishnah in Pesachim. The Rambam doesn't. The Rambam understands that it's talking, when it says, if you don't talk about these three things, you're not Yotzei the mitzvah. It's not talking about the mitzvah of Pesach, Matzah. It's talking about the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. That we're not mekayim the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim fully unless we talk about these three things. what's this about? Why these three things? Well, these are important things. They're, I guess, signposts in the story of the Exodus of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. But I think it's more than that. I think what the Rambam is talking about here is making it experiential. Experiential learning. And this, I could, as an educator, I don't know if this parak in the Rambam is, we could talk about for weeks, the educational theory and the educational lessons that the Rambam is teaching us here in this parak, how to teach, how to connect, how to educate, whether it's students or children. But, the way to talk about, it's very popular, experiential learning, to make it experiential, not just dry from the book, but make it experiential. What's more experiential than picking up the maror, the bitter maror, and you're saying, this is it, mararu et chayenu. They made our lives bitter, and you take a bite of this bitter maror, and you taste it, and you feel the bitterness in you. So we make it something real. We make it experiential, not just something that we talk about in our minds, but something which we bring close to our hearts and to our bodies through making it experiential, through these three things. Again, by making it back and forth, she'elah tshuva. Second, by beginning with the negative, going to the positive. And three, by making it experiential with these three important things. And through that, we're mekayim the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. I would venture to add that the Rambam himself mentions a fourth thing. And that's very interesting in this halacha vav. If you look at halacha vav for a moment here, which I have up here, you'll notice something interesting and different than what probably all of us or most of us say. The Rambam had a slightly different nusach in his Haggadah than we did. We say, B'chol dor vador chayav adam lerot et atzmo ki'ilu hu yatsa miMitzrayim. In every generation, the person should try to picture themselves like she herself left Mitzrayim. Look at the Rambam's language. B'chol dor vador chayav adam leharot et atzmo. A person should show, not lirot et atzmo. Lirot et atzmo is something which takes place internally. Leharot et atzmo, leharot is to display. The mitzvah is to display the cherut, to act out. Very interesting. Sometimes the kids, the grandkids, they want to act things out, put on a little play. There's a makor in the Rambam for this. Chayav adam leharot et atzmo, to display the cherut. There are those I've heard from students, but there's a Sephardic custom. I want to lump all, I don't know if it's all the Sephardim or some. I had students who were Iranians in the States. They would tell me of their custom where the older people, the uncles, I don't know who, you had to reach a certain level to do this. They would walk around the table with sacks, with like a sack. You ever hear this? They'd walk around the table and the people would say to them, מאיפה אתה בא? אני בא ממצרים. לאן אתה הולך? אני הולך לארץ ישראל. And this is the Rambam. This is chayav adam leharot. This was displaying. So if the kids want to put on a play, this is the makor for it. Leharot, there's a mitzvah to not just to feel it, to do all these things, but to display the cherut. And that's why the Rambam right here brings the halacha, and I won't get into it, it's a longer issue, of the mitzvah of haseba. The mitzvah of haseba, according to the Rambam, of reclining when we eat the matzah, when we drink the cups of wine, is part of the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. This is a lamda shah. It's a very interesting idea. According to most opinions, it's the Rabbanon put a mitzvah on an extra thing on the matzah. That when you eat the matzah, part of the requirement is recline when you eat the matzah. So it's a din in the matzah. According to the Rambam, it's not a din in the matzah. It's a din in the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. Part of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim is to recline. And that's why, I will just mention this, there's a machloket whether, let's say one eats the matzah and they forget to recline. Do they have to recline? They have to eat the matzah again. It's a discussion amongst the Rishonim. Do you have to eat the matzah again? I ate the kazayas matzah. I said, oh yeah, I didn't recline. Do I have to eat it again? According to the Rambam, no. It's simple that the answer is no. Why? Because you don't gain anything by eating the matzah again. You already got the mitzvah of matzah. What you did, what was chaser, had nothing to do with the mitzvah of matzah. It had to do with the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. You can eat potatoes and recline. You eat the matzah, we recline for the matzah because the matzah is symbolic of the freedom. But it's not a part of the mitzvah of matzah. It's part of the mitzvah of Sipur Yetziat Mitzrayim. I want to. There's 2 minutes left. I want to say something because we're a group of grandparents. So I'll allow myself something for grandparents. It says in Parashat Bo, it says, "Laman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha, et asher halalti b'Mitzrayim." Keep this between us. I don't know if you should tell this to your children. If I told this to my son-in-law, he gave me a funny look. But okay, here's what it says: "Laman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha, et asher halalti b'Mitzrayim." So that you tell your children and your grandchildren what I did in Mitzrayim. That's a pasuk in Parashat Bo. So the question is, if the parents are telling their children, then why do the parents need to tell the grandchildren? Leman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha. There's a mitzvah to tell bincha. So I tell my children, and they tell their children. So why is it leman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha? What is it that the grandchildren are going to tell the grandparents are going to tell the grandchildren, which the children are not telling the grandchildren, their children? Why is there doesn't have to be a mitzvah to tell the grandchildren, because every generation is telling the next generation. Why does it say leman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha? And the answer which I would give is that the grandparents have a different perspective. The grandparents have seen different parts of life, have seen different things, don't want to chas v'shalom say something educationally which is against the education which the children are giving to the grandchildren. That's the most important. No grandparents wants to create problems in that way. But the grandparents do have a different perspective. They have the perspective of experience, of life experience, of age, of an aroma of history, which maybe the children don't yet have. And that's why it says leman tisaper be'oznei bincha uben bincha, because there's something very special that's given over from the grandparents to the grandchildren.
Moshe?
Yes.
I just want to say that I think also maybe the other way around, the other side is that the grandchildren can see how much alike there is between the Torah that they're hearing from their parents, that they are also hearing from their grandparents, that there is a connection that is just not broken. It's true, there's differences, the same way there's so many different Haggadot. Of course there's differences, but I think it's also for them to see what's similar, what's alike, the continuity, the wow, my grandfather is doing what my father's doing, and he must have learned that from his father. And I think that I think also when I see my children, I'm sitting with them and they are carrying on what they got from their, Baruch Hashem, from their father, and what they also, Baruch Hashem, for a while was zochim to see from their grandparents. I think that is
powerful, very powerful.
Such a powerful part of the Seder.
I agree.
Beautiful.
The whole thing in Leila Seder is to be part of the sharsheret of the Dorot. And even if the grandparents or the great-grandparents aren't there, my mother used to say, and this is where grandpa, that's my grandfather, used to ask a certain question. And my kids now say, oh, last year they told me, Ima always asks this question at this point,
Right.
Where does this come from? What does that do? Why are we doing this? And to get the kids to answer and to try and get them involved. But also, do you know that my grandfather said certain questions on Leila Seder? I don't know. Hashemayim Shamayim Lashem is written on a big building in London. And he would always ask, do you know where this pasuk is written in the middle of London? And it's like, I know that from generations. And I'm part of that whole chain of generations, and I feel
that's very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm gonna thank you, and I'm going to leave it at that. The beautiful
Okay.
stuff. I don't think we're next week. I don't think we're on next week. So I want to wish everyone a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Look forward, hopefully, to seeing you
Sameach.
guys
Chag Sameach.
in person. All the best. Enjoy the
Chag
family. Enjoy the season.
Chag Sameach. Thank you so much.
See each other. A happy occasion.